Northeast Philadelphia Airport with 6 people on board. Ring camera footage shows the plane descending before a massive explosion. A large fire burned in the wake of the crash, prompting a significant response from emergency crews. Vehicles in this area could be seen on fire. Police said multiple people on the ground were hurt, and we spoke with witnesses who detailed what exactly they saw in the aftermath.
There was a fireball, there was debris everywhere, there was people running back and forth, there was so much stuff happening at once.
And it was just very graphic.
There is no word at this time on what caused the jet to go down. Right now, we do know that there are multiple investigations underway. The NTSB will have boots on the ground today to determine the exact cause of the crash. And Chopper 6 is live over the scene right now here in Northeast Philadelphia, where crews, they cleared out for the night as those fires were put out. But you can see in this area that there is just debris scattered across the roadway. We do know that officials are expected to hold a news conference this morning to bring us the latest in this investigation. But obviously, this is an investigation that will span blocks here in Northeast Philadelphia and is sure to take a significant amount of time.
And it's starting to appear that we're getting to look at some of the parts and pieces of this medical aircraft right there near the crosswalk near Cottman and the Boulevard. We do have team coverage as we continue to follow this breaking news. Let's begin with Action News reporter Becca Hendrickson, who's live at the scene right at the perimeter at Cottman Avenue. Becca.
Maggie, like you said, I'm at Cottman and the Boulevard, only really a couple feet from where this tragedy happened yesterday. We've seen more police officers come onto the scene as the morning comes on. Investigators, of course, keeping a tight perimeter around the debris field. Investigators, including from the FBI, NTSB, coming out to the scene this morning to really determine exactly what happened here as a plane fell from the sky, causing devastation. We all know how busy the boulevard is, how many businesses are in the area, how many houses are in the area, just how heavily traveled it is and how many people were impacted. And the video, just shocking. Take a look at the neighborhood surveillance video. The moment that plane crashed from this Ring video, the impact, devastation, a massive fireball exploding in the sky. That's happened between 6 and 6:30 last night on the Boulevard near Cottman Avenue. A medical transport plane with 6 people on board, a child, a pediatric patient, her mother, and 4 crew members, all of whom were not expected to survive. It was a Learjet 55 that had just left Northeast Airport, according to authorities, on its way to Springfield Branson National Airport in Missouri. And this video from Chopper 6, we see the massive crater in the ground, the pieces of the plane surrounding it, the burn-up cars from the impact of this fire, the devastation that this crash caused in such a busy area. Prompted, of course, the massive response of law enforcement officers, firefighters, state troopers, PennDOT, the DEP, other organizations, NTSB, FBI, so many different authorities on the ground here trying to figure out exactly what happened, creating this safety perimeter. The number of fatalities and injuries still unknown at this point.
Right now, we're just asking for prayers for any and everyone who may have been affected. We do want to note that several dwellings and vehicles were impacted. So what are we asking you to do for us right now, Philadelphia? We're urging you to please stay away from the scene. If you see debris, call 911. Don't touch anything.
That's a really important point from the mayor there. That debris needs to be handled by the authorities coming out here to investigate this scene. They need to be able to get their hands on it to figure out exactly what happened, what caused this tragedy. We are here at Cottman and the Boulevard waiting for more answers, expecting that press briefing around 9 a.m. this morning. For now, live here on the Boulevard, Becca Hendrickson, Channel 6 Action News. Maggie and Caroline.
What a massive and devastating scene there. Thank you, Becca.
Let's go now to Action News reporter Corey Davis. He is also live on the scene now where the force of the explosion just sent debris flying all over across the area.
A special thank you to our additional partners who we have spoken with, our federal leaders, U.S. Senators Fetterman, and McCormick, thank you so very much. All hands on deck. They wanted to make sure any and everything that we needed from the federal government, those supports and services are available. Congressman Evans, Boyle, and Scanlon, our congressional delegation, a special thank you to each of you for your support. I also need to affirm that locally here, Senator Joe Picozzi, Rep. Solomon, Reps. Nielsen, Doherty, who represents this area, and Bellman, Commissioner Dealey, and Council Member Driscoll was present. If there was ever a time when we needed to affirm what the One Philly philosophy means, the time is now, and I'm very proud about how our federal, state, and all of our local partners are working hard to deal with this tragedy. I now want to turn it over to our governor and to say thank you, Governor, for your support and being here with us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
The mayor preaches about One Philly. She talks about a unified approach to governing every day. What you're seeing here is a unified response to an awful aviation disaster. For as awful as that aviation disaster was, tonight we also saw the best of Philly. We saw neighbor helping neighbor. We saw Pennsylvanians looking out for one another. I want to reaffirm the comments the mayor said about all of the different agencies working together, and I want to especially thank and salute Philly Fire and Philly Police, who did an extraordinary job this evening. We know that there will be loss in this region, and we want to offer our thoughts and our serious prayers for those who are grieving at this moment. The mayor knows, and I want you all to know, that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania stands firmly with our partners in the city. We have, at the request of Commissioner Bethel, 45 state troopers who are on the ground right here in Northeast Philly. We have 25 members of our PennDOT team who are here right now. We have members of the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Authority who are here, including our director, Randy Padfield, who joins me behind here. We also have members of DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, who are here to make sure that any hazardous materials are addressed. And as you heard the mayor reference, we're joined by several state representatives and senators. I want to thank them. They will make sure that whatever is needed for this community gets to this community. I also spoke earlier this evening with the United States Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Duffy, who offered his full support to Northeast Philly. And as the mayor alluded to, he has dispatched 4 members of the FAA to Philly, and there are 4 members of NTSB on their way as well. We have all the resources that we need. And again, as the mayor always says, One Philly, we are unified in our approach to deal with this emergency. And again, I'll just end by sharing my prayers, the prayers of my wife, Lori, our First Lady, and on behalf of 13 million Pennsylvanians, we are all here for Northeast Philly tonight in this very, very difficult moment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you all. When we have additional information to report, we will come back and give another briefing. But now we want to let our federal, state, and local partners do their jobs and go to work. We'll report back to you when we have more information. Thank you all so very much for your patience and understanding.
Disturbing ring camera video shows a medical jet en route to Springfield, Missouri, taking a nosedive shortly after 6 o'clock Friday evening in Philadelphia and exploding into a fireball. You could see a plume of smoke billowing into the sky. Several cars and homes catching fire, and cell phone video showing a massive amount of debris extending across the intersection.
I just see the plane is getting lower and lower and lower. It nipped the house. When it nipped the house, it hit a couple cars. Boom! And to the plaza, and to the Dunkin' Donuts, everywhere. I've never seen nothing like that a day in my life.
Our Philadelphia station reporting the Learjet was a medical plane carrying 6 people, including 2 doctors, a young patient, and the child's mother. Shriners Hospitals for Children confirming the child is a patient of theirs, saying in a statement in part, quote, Shriners Children's is heartbroken. The Mexican Foreign Ministry is saying all 6 passengers on the plane are Mexican. Officials say the plane crashed several minutes after taking off from Northeast Philadelphia Airport. The mayor of Philadelphia warning residents to stay home.
If you see debris, call 911. Don't touch anything. This is still an active scene under investigation. We do want to note that several dwellings and vehicles were impacted. So what are we asking you to do for us right now, Philadelphia? We're urging you to please stay away from the scene.
Now, we also know that several people on the ground were also injured. That's according to local police. And the weather at the time of this plane crash, well, it was overcast skies. Alan, Elaine.
All right, John, thank you. For the very latest on the Philadelphia plane crash, go to CBSNewYork.com or download the CBS News app.
6 people are feared dead after a small plane crashed in a heavily populated area of Philadelphia on Friday. Video shows the Learjet nosediving out of the sky into a neighborhood and burst into flames. The scene on the ground was chaotic as several homes and businesses caught fire. The medical transport plane had just left from an airport in northeast Philadelphia. It was bound for Missouri with a young patient, her mother, and 4 crew members on board. It crashed 30 seconds after takeoff. Nikki Dementri from our Philadelphia station KYW is at the scene. Nikki, what more can you tell us?
Good morning to you. Well, this section of Philadelphia is one of the busiest areas in the city. That being said, where I'm standing right now, roads behind me, as you can see, remained closed as this investigation continues. About a block from where we are standing, where the crime scene tape is, there is a set of barricades. You see a lot of police officers there and law enforcement right now. That is where the focus of the investigation is. You can also see several cars that are burnt down to the metal. Plane parts are also littered across Cottman Avenue. That is the debris field. I want you to take a look at some home surveillance video that shows the moment the medical jet plunged to the ground. CBS News has learned a girl and her mother here in Philadelphia for treatment at Shriners Children's were on board, heading first to Missouri and then home to Mexico. According to a hospital spokesperson, 2 doctors with Jet Rescue Air Ambulance and 2 crew members were also on that jet. Now, witnesses describe a chaotic scene, seeing the plane, as some shared with us, seemingly fall straight out of the sky. Several we spoke with said they heard a loud boom before seeing a fireball light up the nighttime sky and a mushroom cloud of smoke. People also shared the smell of jet fuel while it took over and lingered for hours.
It just comes down and you just like, all you hear is like, and then it's just like everybody's just panicking, everything is just going on, like, you know, everybody like, oh my god, like, yo, like, did the plane just hit, this just hit?
Because it came out of the clouds going in a straight nosedive, and the second it came through the clouds, it was probably only another second before it hit the ground.
Now, the NTSB is leading this investigation. We've also seen folks with the FBI here on the ground. That being said, we are waiting to hopefully hear later this morning from Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, as well as the Philadelphia Mayor Sherrell Parker and others. Dana?
All right, Nikki, thank you.
But just within the past few minutes here at Cottman and Bustleton, we've seen some of the FBI and ATF agents arriving here. You see them right there in the black jackets walking up to the scene here. So we're about a block and a half away from where this plane crash happened. And as we zoom in, you can see the debris field. There is a lot of debris out here. Police have the entire area blocked off. In some cases, they even put up some of these Jersey barriers to prevent people from coming through.
The FAA says the National Transportation Safety Board will lead the investigation into just what happened. Here with us now is former NTSB board member John Golia. John, good morning. Thank you so much for joining. The sun is just coming up in Philadelphia. I want to ask, this is the first look investigators are getting while the sun is up in the daytime. What are investigators looking for now at this stage?
The first order of business will be to document all the pieces in the location. So they're going to go over the whole field. They're going to go right back to the airport because it was only in the air 30 seconds. So they'll start on the airport and start looking for any pieces that have may fallen off the airplane before the impact. Pieces to come off the airplane before an impact sometimes can tell a very, very large story.
Sure.
But let's assume for a second they don't find any pieces. They're going to look at the fuel that was put onto this airplane from the actual fuel truck. They'll actually take a sample from the fuel truck. And because it crashed so early after takeoff, that's one of the very first things that you would look at is.
Good evening. Another plane crash in the United States has claimed at least 6 lives. An air ambulance had only just taken off in Philadelphia when it suddenly came down and exploded in the middle of a busy street, setting nearby homes on fire. This latest tragedy coming just days after a passenger jet and a military helicopter collided in Washington, D.C.
Exploding on impact.
What the hell? What the hell?
A jet crashes onto a busy Philadelphia street.
Oh, shit, a plane just crashed.
It fell so quick, the fireball overwhelming.
It came out the sky.
People on the ground didn't know what had happened.
Do you think it was something out the sky? I don't know. Is it a plane or a car?
It was a twin-engine jet, seen here plummeting at speed, then erupting at a busy intersection near a shopping mall. The flames spreading so fast, cars, homes and buildings were set alight.
Oh, God.
This taken from a nearby house. The Medivac flight had left Northeast Philadelphia Airport carrying a young girl who had finished her treatment. She was on her way home back to Mexico. Her mother and 4 crew members were on board.
We have a lost aircraft. We're not exactly sure what happened, so we're trying to figure it out for now.
The plane's last known speed was more than 378 kilometres an hour. Its altitude just under 500 metres. It appears to spin in a nosedive before crashing around 6:30 p.m. local time, peak hour.
It was a big ball of fire. It just flew into the sky. And when it nipped the house, it hit a couple cars. Boom! And to the plaza, and to the Dunkin' Donuts, everywhere. I've never seen nothing like that a day in my life.
In the United States, Miley Hogan, 7 News.
Aviation editor Blake Johnson is in Philadelphia tonight. Blake, is there any word on how many people were injured or killed on the ground?
Angie, 6 people on the ground were taken to hospital. 3 of them have since been discharged. Quite remarkable that more people on the ground weren't hurt or killed. The impact is down this street on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, homes have been damaged. Some residents have been displaced and will not be staying there tonight. Transport safety investigators, busy with the DC crash, have sent 1 investigator to Philadelphia tonight. A larger team will arrive tomorrow. People here are asking, what is going on? 2 fatal plane crashes in just 3 days. 2 new angles make the collision much clearer, but a big question remains. How does the helicopter pilot not see a jet, its landing lights on, cross its path? Crash. Both aircraft are so low, there's no chance of recovery after they collide. The plane spins into the icy water, the helicopter finishes belly up. No survivors. You see that? A wet, foggy day in DC, making the recovery job just that little bit harder.
We have recovered 41 sets of remains, and 28 of those victims have been positively identified.
They've also recovered the black boxes from both the jet and the helicopter.
We have a high level of confidence that we will be able to get a full download in the very near future.
Investigators hope that data will help answer what went wrong. The US president has already come to his own conclusion, claiming the Black Hawk was too high.
It was above the 200 limit by double. It shouldn't have been there.
And doubling down on his claim, Democrats are to blame.
This was all because of weak rules in the Biden administration.
The US Army has identified 2 of the 3 on board, Chief Warrant Officer Andrew Eves and Staff Sergeant Ryan O'Hara. The family of the 3rd soldier has asked for privacy. A former Black Hawk helicopter pilot says the chopper crew may have been confused.
It is a very cluttered airspace with a lot of lighting and the lights reflecting on the river. And so with that, it's easy to kind of get a little disoriented as far as the height.
The low altitude corridor used by the helicopter has now been closed indefinitely. Investigators won't say what they think until their preliminary report in 1 month.
Our job is to find the facts, regardless of what anyone may be saying. Our investigators never want to see this happen again.
2 of the 3 runways here at Reagan National Airport remain closed because of the crash, and the wreckage is still in the water. They need heavy machinery to lift it and the remaining victims out. That's likely to happen tomorrow. Entire families were wiped out in this crash. Flight attendants, a civil rights lawyer, sport teams.
It's just this place of pain that I...
So I want to bring in Randy Babbitt, a former FAA administrator. Now, Randy, thanks for being with us as well. We have a little bit of reporting from Jay Blackman, one of our producers who covers aviation. And he says that a source with knowledge of the situation tells NBC News the staffing at DCA last night at Reagan Airport was not normal for the amount of traffic and time of day. According to a preliminary FAA safety report on the collision, this is his reporting from a source, the DC Tower usually has a controller who focuses on helicopter traffic. The FAA's guidelines, though, do allow for that position to be combined with another controller's position. So one controller controls both airplanes and helicopters. Last night at the time of the crash, that position was combined. This is a reporting. The source goes on to say this is unacceptable, or this is acceptable under the FAA's safety standards. That is certainly going to be a question. If it was acceptable to combine these 2 roles, and if that did in fact happen, should it remain acceptable going forward?
Well, they're going to have to take a good look at that for sure. I think the difference between those 2 positions, whether it's manned by a single or dual, has to do with the time of day and the amount of traffic. And as the evening goes on and traffic fades, you just don't need as many controllers, and they're trying to be efficient. But it certainly will come into question as we move forward.
Give me a little bit about this airspace, the congestion in this airspace. As I understand it, military aircraft or military helicopters doing training exercises have a ceiling of 200 feet. Is there any circumstance where they would breach that ceiling, where they would be above it? And if they are above that ceiling, if they were, say, flying at 300 feet and potentially in the path of another aircraft, would there be an alert that goes off? Would somebody else besides the people inside the helicopter be notified that they have breached that ceiling?
Well, it's an interesting problem. The equipment in the aircraft, that traffic warning and collision avoidance equipment, is designed, to notify you of any positions where you see a potential for collision, and the pilots get warned, and they get warned with evasive action, whether they should go left, right, up, down, comes to them. However, when you get in close to the airport and at low altitudes, those warnings get dampened because there's so many airplanes. You can imagine if you're 500 feet on final and there's 8 airplanes to be waiting to take off, you don't want alerts coming from all of them. If you're landing on one way and someone else is taking off, you're completely legal and clear. But again, you get a warning, so they dampen those. So, that's just a matter of fact. So that they did not get the type of warning that they would have been had they both been 1,000 feet higher.
Was this surprising to you that this happened in this airspace like this?
Very much. I spent much of my career as a line pilot flying international air. Yeah, I was based here, and so I have a lot of experience landing there.
Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip, and we begin with breaking news tonight. Another plane has crashed in another American city, and this time it is Philadelphia. I want to reset what we know at this hour. We are told a twin-engine medevac jet took off from a local airport en route to Missouri. That plane reached 1,600 feet after takeoff before plunging 11,000 feet per minute. 6 people were on board, including a child patient. Here is another look at the crash as it happened. You saw there the jet plummeting almost like a missile out of the sky before an explosion. It landed in a busy section of the city near a mall. It's unknown whether there are any casualties on the ground. Here, though, is how one witness described the scene.
I was in shock. I'm still in shock. Like, this is insane.
why can this and before that, to be honest, in my mind I thought, like, what if the rocket would because I'm from Ukraine, right, and there's war, there's always rockets coming in and stuff like that, and then I see like things flying, like, no way, the war started again, and you say, you never know.
Here's the conversation also that we have now obtained from the air traffic control tower. Listen.
Medevac Med Service, Northeast Tower. Medevac Med Service 056, Northeast Tower. You on frequency? We have a lost aircraft. We're not exactly sure what happened, so we're trying to figure it out.
Let's go straight to Philadelphia, where Councilman Mike Driscoll, who represents that area, is with us now. Councilman, thank you very much for joining us. I know this is a very active scene. There was just a briefing with other city officials, but I want to ask you directly about that plane, 6 people on it, according to the company. Do you believe that there are any survivors on that aircraft?
Well, Abby, I can't say for sure, but it doesn't look good. It's a sad situation we have here in Northeast Philadelphia. We were only celebrating a couple of days ago, our football team's success, and now we have this tonight. And it looks like not only the people that won that plane and the person that needed medical help, they seem to be
Video captured the chilling moments after the plane went down.
Approach to runway 24. What's going on down there? Position 755. We have a lost aircraft. We're not exactly sure what happened, so we're trying to figure it out. For now, the field is going to be closed, so no inbounds or outbounds probably.
Yeah, here to discuss is Top Gun Navy graduate Matthew Wiz Buckley. Matthew, thank you for joining us. You hear that audio. When it first came out, it was reported this was the moments before. Now we understand it makes more sense. It's the moments after. Walk us through what you hear there.
Well, obviously, Tower realized they lost the aircraft. There's previous audio of the control tower clearing them to contact Philadelphia departure, and they don't. So, and either the captain or the first officer of the medevac flight acknowledged that frequency change. So sounded like everything was fine in the cockpit up until a couple, maybe 30, 40 seconds after that.
Yeah, we're being told that this entire scenario took place in less than a minute, which is hard to believe. But this is something I wanted to ask you about because of your experience with very fast jets. We look at the video, and to the naked eye, to the average person, it looks like a missile coming to the ground at full speed. I know it's a lot to put in perspective, but when you see those videos and you see them all together, what do you see? Do you see a plane that could be at full throttle? Are there mechanical failures that you're reminded of? We showed a graphic at the beginning of the show that shows the steep angle in which it was going up, and now it's going down. Give us any insight you have there, and I know we're speculating.
Absolutely, we're speculating, but in nearly 4 decades of flying and flying fighters, that jet was simply not flying. That was a missile. That was a rocket. Clearly, something catastrophic happened either with the airframe or the engines to cause that. The last radar hits that I believe I saw where it was going down at close to 11,000 feet per minute and close to about 280 knots. So clearly something catastrophic. And looking at the videos, it's on fire. There are flames leaving the aircraft. That tells me there's something catastrophic. Let me share with you something I was thinking about is as an F-18 Hornet pilot and as a civilian pilot, we own our own fighter jet for the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. Before I took off in the Hornet or my personal jet, you go to full power at the hold short or on the runway. Yeah. Why? Because the engines are at the most, power at takeoff. So if anything's going to happen with a motor, it's going to happen in the first couple seconds of flight. Business jets, airliners, they don't go to the hold short and run the motors up to full power. They don't get on the runway and run the motors up to full power. Yeah. So something to think about there.
No, absolutely. seen that happen. So the NTSB investigators, they're preparing to examine the newly recovered black box from the Black Hawk helicopter involved in the D.C. crash just a few days ago. President Trump says the military helicopters, he thinks, were flying too high. I want to play a clip real quick of newly minted Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on this.
The black box from the Black Hawk. When we do, we'll get a sense of internal communications. That might tell us exactly who was piloting that Black Hawk. You had a captain in training, you had a chief warrant officer too as an instructor, and then you also had a staff sergeant in that Black Hawk as well. Who was talking, who was on the comms, who was piloting, and then what, if any, confusion was there at the end, right? We're looking at altitude, and the president was clear about that. Someone was at the wrong altitude.
Yeah, we're not here to point fingers. I don't think that President Trump or Pete Hegseth are as well. But when we look at how closely military operations were happening to civilian air traffic, how common is that? Is that very common? Is it unique to D.C.? I'd love some insight on that.
Well, hitting another aircraft is never common. Around the D.C. area with all the military and civilian aircraft, it looks like controlled chaos, and it is. As long as it's controlled. If somebody doesn't do their job, bad things happen. So I got to tell you, man, Occam's razor, usually the most reasonable thing is the most reasonable thing. Mm-hmm. They were off course. Route 4 through that corridor, they're supposed to hug the eastern side of the Potomac River. They were completely off course. They were in the middle of the Potomac. The max altitude is 200 feet on Route 4. So you're all the way over to the east. You do not go above 200 feet. But when they said, hey, traffic in sight, the wrong traffic, they might have said, hey, there's nobody around us. Maybe we can deviate a little bit for whatever reason. So there's 2 strikes right there. Off course, off altitude. Third strike is the controller. As soon as he heard traffic in sight, since he was single manning 2 positions, put a mental check mark there that said, I'm busy. They have that other traffic in sight. I'm going to focus on other things.
Yeah.
Never been to air traffic control school, but I can almost guarantee you on day 1, they tell you if you see 2 targets coming at each other on your scope, even if one of those guys said traffic in sight, give them a harder traffic call. PAC 25, confirm you have traffic left 11, level, acknowledge. That would have got the hair on the back of their neck and the helos standing up, and this mishap wouldn't have happened. So a couple links in this chain that if you took one of them out, this didn't happen.
And a tragedy unfolds. Again, we're not here to point blame. We're here to try to understand what happened, and I'm sure we'll learn more as the days go on. Thank you so much for joining us, and, of course, thank you for your service.
You bet. God bless, bro. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Action News reporter Becca Hendrickson is live with information from the scene there in Northeast Philadelphia. Becca.
Maggie, we are here at Cottman in the Boulevard. We're waiting on that press conference we've been telling you all morning is supposed to happen at 9 a.m. Now, I did speak with some officials this morning. More and more investigators are pouring onto the scene. The delay in waiting for that press conference has a lot to do with making sure that everyone, all of these partners with these massive investigation, are up to speed and on the same page about what's going on. We've only had a couple hours of daylight here at this point, and that is why investigators are at this massive scene behind me here on Cottman in the Boulevard, really getting their first look since last night at the massive crater that was created because of that plane crash. You can see the police presence here. We have Philadelphia Police, state troopers, so many law enforcement partners in this, all investigating this. Take a look at the Ring video we've been showing you all morning and last night, too, of that plane falling out of the sky at Cottman in the Boulevard, coming from the Northeast Airport. The impact causing this, that massive fireball is what it looked like and what it was really, and the devastation that followed that, just so shocking to see in such a densely populated area of Philadelphia. Just to rehash, it happened between 6 and 6:30 last night. A medical transport plane with 6 people on board, including a child, a patient who was here to get treatment. her mother, and 4 crew members. A Learjet 55 that had just left the Northeast Airport, according to authorities. It was on its way to Springfield Branson National Airport in Missouri. It was a medical rescue plane, and I want to show you now what we found here on the scene. We're about a quarter mile away on Cottman and the Boulevard from where that crash happened, and you can see this cylinder. It appears to look like some sort of oxygen tank. This was a piece of the plane that flew a quarter mile away. I was talking to investigators about this because, of course, the guidance we're giving is call 911, don't touch debris. They're aware of that piece there, and they said there's actually another tank a little bit closer to the scene from where we are, too. So the pieces of this plane flying everywhere, including, and we have surveillance video of this just obtained this morning, a piece of that plane flying into Four Seasons Diner. This is a restaurant near us, so again, about a quarter mile away. It flew in through the window and it hit a man in the head. I am told he is doing okay. We spoke with workers about that horrific scene this morning.
People also was sitting here. Nothing happened. This guy's here, but the guy second booth hit his head.
How's he doing?
He was okay, but I mean he was bleeding. A lot of bleeding on his head.
Just a shocking incident to happen in that restaurant, again, a quarter mile away from the scene. So you really see just how far the impact of this plane crash was, how far that debris was flying. That impact we're still learning more about. We're not going to know the full scope of it for hours and maybe even days now. But we do know at this point that 6 people who were on board that medical plane are not believed to have survived, and we are waiting to hear more about potential other injuries as well as soon as authorities are ready to speak to us here on the scene. Live in Northeast Philadelphia, Becca Hendrickson, Channel 6 Action News. Maggie and Caroline.
That really puts it into perspective, Becca. Someone
Officials
who is
say a medical transport jet with a child patient, her mother, and 4 others aboard crashed into a Philadelphia neighborhood shortly after takeoff. All 6 people aboard were from Mexico. The child had been treated in Philadelphia for a life-threatening condition and was being transported home to Mexico. The flight's final destination was Tijuana after a stop in Missouri. Vehicles and dwellings were impacted by the crash. One man at the scene telling reporters he was worried about a nearby shopping center.
Employees there are my friends. These are my family around this area, so I'm just so concerned about everybody's safety.
There's no official word on any possible fatalities. Officials with the Jet Rescue Air Ambulance says 4 other seasoned crew members were with the mother and child, assuring everyone involved in these medical flights go through rigorous training. Jet Rescue is based in Mexico, where the plane is registered and has.
There's a lot of people here, especially the ones who saw this, who ran that direction before first responders got here. I want to show you, this is Mikey. He works at this gas station right here on the corner of Cottman and Roosevelt. Just, what, Mikey, a block, 2 blocks down from where this happened. Tell me what you saw and what happened after that.
So I was at the door over here at the gas station, and all you heard was this loud bang when the whole building started shaking. You literally, right here, you can see a whole flames just engulf inside in the sky. Like it was a huge fireball going in the sky. So I tried to, keep the door shut because debris was flying over here. And customers were trying to, run outside and stuff. I didn't want any of our customers to get, hurt by any objects flying in the air. So I tried to keep the door shut. After a while, I opened it up, and I went to go run over there to see, what exactly happened. And, a lot of people were over here, in shock, just scared and, running and screaming. People were crying. And when I got over there, as I'm walking down, I seen, pieces of, a plane or metal objects all straight down Cottman Ave. So when I got down right past the Sides Hot Chicken, you could see a whole line of cars completely in flames. And, first responders, the police, they arrived very fast. The response was perfect. They came down and, I don't know, from the side of my eye, I looked over and you could see the house was on fire. So we're literally screaming to the police, the house is on fire. So the firefighters, they ended up going down that block to assist for the house, but it's really tragic, and I really feel sad. I feel bad for the families and everybody that was involved, and I just hope that everybody's okay.
Gosh, seeing the video, it takes your breath away. I can't imagine actually being here and walking to the scene and seeing this happen. How do you describe that moment? What was going through your mind?
Honestly, it was like an adrenaline that ran through my body. I just wanted to be able to help. If there was anything I could have did to assist, like I would do anything to help another person's life, you know? So that's, in my mind, I didn't think about anything else but helping other people and making sure everybody would be safe.
And it wasn't long before you said those first responders converged and describe that all. I mean, we've seen law enforcement all around this area. What was that like?
Yes, they completely, the Philadelphia Police and Philadelphia Fire Department did a heck of a job. They got here very quick, and they assisted this whole situation very fast. They did a really good job. They blocked everything off. People kept trying to walk, towards the smoke. It was black smoke. You could smell like the jet fuel, and people were like walking towards it. So they're trying to tell people like back up, back up, back up. So they did a really good job in assisting everybody to get away from the scene and everything. So.
Mikey, can you tell me anything more about what you experienced? You described the smell in the air, the thick black smoke. You saw the flames.
Yes, I saw all the flames. Like I said, every car on the street was engulfed in flames. The house was in flames, and like the smoke. Like, even when it happened, like it just looked like something from a movie. How like big the flames was, how loud it was, and it just it's sad. It really is.
Eventually, they pushed you back. Describe the scene now.
So now it seems like they have it a little bit more settled now. I'm guessing they got the fire completely out and whatnot. But I'm just hoping that everybody is okay. It's really unfortunate.
I'm hoping everyone is okay. We're still waiting for so many answers. What is going through your mind now? Some time removed from this, have you had a second to catch your breath and think about what you saw?
It's honestly very crazy to me, like especially with the accident that just happened with all them innocent people losing their lives on that other flight, American Airlines. It's just sad, the aviation, they got to get it together. Seriously, they got to get it together. So we can't be having this happen, especially in Philadelphia.
Mikey, we so appreciate your time. Your last name?
Littlejohn.
Mikey Littlejohn.
Yes.
Mikey works as a security officer.
I'm a Pennsylvania State agent.
Excellent.
So,
right here at the gas station, right where it happened.
31 now. Let's get to this breaking news this morning. The investigation into a deadly plane crash in Northeast Philadelphia. Ring doorbell camera video showing the terrifying moment the aircraft descended into the ground, exploding into a massive fireball. Let's take another look from another angle. The aftermath widespread. Nearby cars going up in flames, smoke overwhelming the area. Of course, all of this coming just days after that mid-air collision between a jet and a military helicopter in our nation's capital. Thanks so much for joining us for Good Day Philadelphia Weekend. I'm Shayna Ferreira. It is Saturday, February 1st, 2025. So let's get you caught up on what we know so far this morning on the air. The jet rescue ambulance plane was carrying a pediatric patient, so a young child and her mother and 4 crew members when it crashed along Common Avenue near Bustleton and the Roosevelt Mall. Shortly after 6 o'clock last night, mind you. Now, the patient was being treated at Shriners and was on her way back to her home country of Mexico. The crash happened less than 3 miles from Northeast Philadelphia Airport. The plane quickly disappeared from the radar, according to officials, after taking off from that airport at roughly 6:06 p.m. The damage from the crash impacting homes nearby, cars, and businesses for blocks. We have multiple crews covering the story this morning. It is the story of the day and will likely be the story for quite some time as investigators sift through all of this. We'll get to our Jennifer Joyce in just a moment. But first, let's start with Greg Payne. You are pretty much in the thick of where that plane came crashing down. And now we're getting really the first look at this in daylight.
Yeah, Shana, well, as you mentioned, this crash happened at 6 p.m. yesterday, and it is a very active scene, and you can actually see off in the distance, there are FBI, there is ATF, so all different types of response groups that are here. Now, I wanted you to take a look at this video from one of our live trucks.
Major aircraft emergency is unfolding tonight. An air ambulance has plummeted to the ground, engulfing a Philadelphia neighbourhood in flames. A child patient and 5 people are feared dead. And a warning, this vision is confronting.
It looks like a missile, but this is suburban Philadelphia, and that is a plane. A Medivac jet plummeting to the ground, a fireball engulfing the aircraft and everything in its surrounds.
What the hell? What the hell? Oh my God!
On the streets, chaos and confusion.
Get up!
The impact zone was spread wide. jet fuel igniting homes and vehicles.
Everyone, all hands on deck. That's where we are right now.
This plane was a Learjet 55 owned by Jet Rescue, an air ambulance service. The twin-engine aircraft carrying a child, her mother and 4 crew, including doctors. It had only just taken off, bound for Tijuana, Mexico. It was in the air for just 41 seconds, reaching 1,600 feet before communications with air traffic control cut out.
Medevac Med Service 056 Northeast Tower, you on frequency? Medevac Med Service 056 Northeast Tower.
We have a lost aircraft. We're not exactly sure what happened, so we're trying to figure it out.
This flight was a repatriation flight of a patient who recovered and was headed home. She was fit to fly.
What exploded? What exploded?
I was right here at the door of my job, and all I could see is a big ball of flames in the sky. Literally, you heard a loud, loud bang. It shook the entire building. The whole building shook.
I was in shock. I'm still in shock. Like, this is insane. Why can this happen? And before that, to be honest, in my mind, I thought, like, what if the rocket would, because I'm from Ukraine, right? And there's war.
From the US president, so sad to see the plane go down in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. More innocent souls lost. Our people are totally engaged. This second major emergency just 2.5 hours away from Washington, D.C., and 48 hours after the country's deadliest commercial aeroplane crash in decades. America again asking how and why. In the United States, Lauren Tomasi, 9 News.
We're learning more tonight about the moments leading up to America's worst aviation accident in decades. Flight data has revealed the Black Hawk helicopter may have been flying off course.
It's the clearest and most confronting angle yet of this catastrophic crash. The Black Hawk helicopter seen flying in on the left of your screen. It does not appear to make an evasive manoeuvre as it flies directly toward the incoming American Airlines passenger jet. An explosion in the air over Washington, D.C., and pieces of both aircraft plummet into the icy Potomac River below.
Oh, what happened?
Oh, my God! Tonight, new flight tracking data shows that military chopper may have been flying off course.
The airplane was coming down on its track. It was perfect. It was in perfect shape coming down, and something was in its way. You can't let that happen.
The Black Hawk had been using a specialised, narrow, low-altitude corridor, but moments before the crash, it appeared to climb some 30 metres above its approved altitude. The Federal Aviation Administration today announcing an indefinite shutdown of that flight path. What concerns have you had specifically about the congested airspace, and have you ever raised those directly with the FAA?
The United States airspace is the safest in the world. Safety is one of our top priorities.
It wasn't safe in this instance. There have been near misses here before. Have you raised concerns with the FAA about the congested airspace around Washington's airports?
We comply with all FAA safety regulations.
Just 24 hours before this mid-air disaster, radar shows another American flight had to abort landing due to a helicopter crossing its flight path at the same airport. And in years past, pilots have reported nearly a dozen near misses. Is there time for a permanent shift in DC and across the country to keep airspace safe?
In this incident, it should not have happened. We have in aviation what's called a Swiss cheese approach, wherein if something fails, a backup should catch it. Multiple layers of redundancy.
Tonight, cranes have been brought in. The operation to salvage the wreckage from the Potomac River is underway. It is expected to take some considerable time. The search for answers and the pain of the victims' families will last long beyond that. 41 people have now been recovered from the crash site. It is a slow and delicate operation. Investigators also locating the black boxes from both aircraft. They're under analysis.
We have right now 2 distinct debris fields.
Tonight, questions over how and why as the president departs the city bound for Mar-a-Lago.
So we're going to the Winter White House. We're going to be working all weekend.
At Reagan National Airport, Jonathan Kersley, 9 News.
Well, just moments ago, the latest Israeli hostages were released. 2 men handed over to the Red Cross. The 4th exchange comes as furious crowds gathered at the Gaza border, protesting against Donald Trump's plans for displaced Palestinians.
Thousands converge on the border of Egypt and Gaza, waving flags and chanting, "Long live Egypt."
Pass 25, this is Georgia in flight. Pass 25, pass 1, this is Georgia.
At 8:47 p.m., an Army Black Hawk helicopter collided with a regional jet in the nation's capital. The crash occurred over the Potomac River near Reagan National Airport, killing 67 people. It's one of the most restricted airspaces in the country. But this particular area has long worried pilots like retired Army officer Daryl Feller.
That's probably the most dangerous spot on all those routes in D.C.
So here's everything we know about why that area is so precarious. The 33-mile radius around Washington, D.C. is considered a special flight rules area. Pilots have to have advanced clearance from the FAA to fly here, and aircraft must have altitude encoding transponders, among other things. Within that, there's a 17-mile flight-restricted zone around Reagan Airport, with even stricter rules. And then there are prohibited areas around the White House, National Mall, and the Vice President's residence. But even with the restrictions, it's still one of the most congested airspaces in the country, with civilian, military, police, and other government aircraft constantly operating. To help manage this, D.C. has designated helicopter corridors, as well as altitude restrictions to keep everyone safe. So what happened during the crash? Flight data shows the Black Hawk helicopter flying south down a helicopter corridor over the Potomac River. Military officials say the pilots were experienced and were conducting an annual night training mission known as a check ride. Meanwhile, American Airlines Flight 5342 was traveling north toward Reagan National. It was originally supposed to land on runway 1, with a flight path that goes up the river. But at approximately 8:42 p.m., minutes before landing, the jet was told to use a different, shorter runway.
Check runway 33.
Yeah, we can do 33 for Blue 6342.
Change the curve runway 33, clear to land.
Runway changes aren't unusual, but it meant the plane had to bow right before turning sharply left and cutting across the helicopter corridor. A move that pilots say makes the jet hard for helicopters to see, especially at a low altitude.
Confusion with ground lights is what it's called. When you're flying south and you get just to the east of the airport, off to the left is southeast DC. And so there's a lot of city lights, street lights. I-295 is over there, so there's a lot of vehicle lights. What happens is low-flying aircraft will get lost in the background of all those city lights, and you can't see them if they're moving towards you, away from you, or you can't see them at all.
There are also questions about staffing of air traffic control that night and whether more people should have been working. Another potential problem was altitude. Helicopters are supposed to fly below 200 feet in this part of the corridor, but flight data shows the helicopter may have risen above 300 feet as the airplane was descending from 400 feet. Officials say data from the aircraft's recording device still needs to be investigated to confirm. But Feller says even if altitude was a factor, something else likely went wrong before that.
A professional Army aviator is not going to fly within 100 feet of a passenger jet. He's just not going to do that. I would suspect that he didn't see the jet.
During a press briefing, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said this.
There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DoD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top-tier aviation assets inside the DoD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable.
After the crash, the FAA announced it would restrict helicopter traffic in the area where the Black Hawk was traveling.
I'm here with Aaron Murphy. He's a commercial pilot. He's also a flight instructor. He has logged hundreds of hours in flight simulators like the one that we are in right now. And what he's doing is he's put up on the simulation, this is what the approach to Reagan Airport would actually look like. Now, this is not a CRJ 700, it's a 737, but it gives you an idea of what these pilots would be, or any pilot for that matter, would be looking at on approach to Reagan, correct?
That's correct. So as you can see out the window right now, the only way you know there's a river beneath us is because of what we call a black hole. There is no definition, there are no lights. We know there's a bridge going across the river just ahead of us here, and that's how we know that's water. And of course, you know the area flying in here as a pilot, you would recognize, you would know already that is a river. But that's what it looks like at night.
When you're training these pilots on approach, what are some of the things that you specifically are telling them to look out for?
Number one, other traffic, which unfortunately is a situation that just happened yesterday. Looking out the window right now, for example, you see how the lights have a bit of a twinkling effect? A lot of that can camouflage other aircraft, the lights within that carpeting of lights. It can be very difficult to see other moving vehicles. And not only that, but then you have moving vehicles on the roadways in the lights.
And so very difficult, obviously, to see something like a Black Hawk helicopter.
100%, yes, it would be very difficult to see an aircraft like that. This airport is a known hotspot in aviation. So coming into Reagan, number one is traffic. Even though you brief it and you discuss it and you're ready and you've got it sorted out, this is a perfect example of how sometimes things just unfold in a way that you really don't expect.
Even with experienced pilots?
Yes, and if you listen to some of the reports that CNN has done with some other very famous pilots that we have, they have said that they've been into this airport many, many times with helicopters flying underneath them. So it's a standard procedure. Something was different last night. Something happened that was different enough to bring the airplanes together. The aircraft came together.
Whenever there's an air traffic tragedy, lessons are learned. I'm wondering if you think what lessons might be learned at this time.
This is a procedural accident. We need to get deeper into the procedures of how the helicopters are flying up and down the river, and even how the aircraft are approaching and doing that circling approach to land on 33. We need to fine-tune that. There's been lots of different situations at this airport. It's a hot spot in the aviation community.
Because of all the traffic.
Many pilots know this already, and that's why you have specialized training to fly into that airport, for exactly this reason.
Aaron Murphy joins us now. Hi, Aaron. So I want to note that the simulator you're in is a Boeing 737, not a CRJ 700 like the aircraft involved in the crash. But this is essentially, my understanding is essentially the same thing that any pilot would see on approach to Reagan National Airport. How do you think, just explain further how you think the lights at night could have played a role in what happened? Take us there.
The human factors, before I get into my explanation, Pamela, thank you so much for having me. I've been following the story. I'm on the edge of tears constantly. I am so in tune with the families and the friends and everyone who was affected by this incredible accident. Let's get on with what everybody needs to know. Flying into any airport at night is an increased risk, increased challenges. The human physiology, we can start with that. Your vision is not quite the same in darkness as it is in light, and I think most of us know that already. So coming into an airport, any airport in the world, literally, where there are other aircraft, most definitely there's going to be airplanes. That becomes something you have to mitigate, a risk that must be mitigated, and that mitigation is done through training and procedures. And the only way to really be sure that training and procedures work is we must apply them to the real world situation and analyze very closely what further risks and what further issues are occurring in the operations.
So I want to dive a little bit deeper into that, because you have said that pilots flying into DCA have to have specialized training to fly into that area. Why is that, and what does that look like?
The DC airport, the Reagan National, is just so busy, and the airspace is a little bit compressed because of all the restricted airspace with the government buildings surrounding. The density of the traffic, you need specific training and you need specific guidance when it's your first couple of times into this airport. And that's true of all the major airlines. They will receive that additional extra training for this airport in particular.
Yeah, because you've called the DC area, that airspace, a hot spot. What makes this airspace just so complicated? And how do you think the fact that the FAA is now indefinitely banning helicopter routes in that area will play a role and help out?
The number one threat, as we'll call it, would be the helicopter routes, and they're flying beneath the aircraft in a routine way. We look at the statistics of that particular interaction, and so far it's been okay. Near misses have been, there's been a few in the area, that's for sure. What we have found out, of course, now too late, that the procedures and the training for this specific threat, this specific airport, clearly is not the best way to be doing this.
So tell me a little bit more about the TCAS system, if you're still there, because that's supposed to alert aircraft if there's going to be, the potential for a collision. Why didn't that prevent this from happening here?
That's a great question, Pamela. I'm obviously in the captain's seat of the 737, and in the center pedestal area, right between the pilots, is where the TCAS system is typically located. The TCAS shares a little box with what's called the transponder, and the TCAS itself is a traffic collision avoidance system. So it has a TA and an RA. The TA is the traffic advisory. So it's going to put up information on the navigation displays to tell the pilots where the airplanes are in the local area. Now, the targets are changing their positions on this screen. These targets are also showing their elevation, their changes in elevation as well. So it's very helpful to be able to see that. And as the targets move closer to your target, and in our case, we have a white triangle on the navigation display. You probably can't see this very well. The targets will change color, and then the system will call out traffic. If you're not really alert or you haven't noticed it yet, traffic, and we're already ahead of that for sure. So that's the advisory section of that. The resolution, the RA resolution is where, when that aircraft, that threat becomes too close to our aircraft, I will actually get indications on my primary flight display, and it will tell me, climb now. These systems are interconnected between the aircraft, independent of air traffic control and human intervention. So the other aircraft will receive a descend now. So the airplanes are doing two different things. The fastest way to get away from another person or another object is the opposite direction. All right, so that's extremely important. I just want to lead us into how this could possibly have not worked in this situation. In the specific situation of arriving at Reagan National and the circling approach, or even the straight-in approach to 01, the circle to 33, the issue here is that the TCAS was the TCAS was indicating correctly and probably giving warnings. There is an inhibit below 1,000 feet. The screens would be showing the information. Air traffic control is guiding the aircraft and making sure separation is maintained. And this is where it leads into some questions I have regarding the actual ATC communications. And this is not a blame. Nobody in this situation is to blame. This is an extremely busy airport with an extremely high rate of operation, and its procedure and its training that are the downfalls of this situation, things that we have created that are not quite good enough. We need to improve on that.
With the moment of impact. It's nighttime, January 29th, just before 9 p.m. local over Washington, D.C. Ignore this plane taking off. It's not directly involved. It's these two dots you want to keep your eye on. This is a Sikorsky H-60
Joining us now here
Black
on
Hawk military helicopter. This is American Eagle Flight 5342. That's an American Airlines plane on approach for a landing at Reagan Washington National Airport. They're about to crash into each other. What that would have sounded like from a comms perspective, we can begin to understand, courtesy of a site called Live ATC. They monitor air traffic communication for more than 1,000 airports worldwide.
Pass 25, CRJ in flight. Pass 25, pass line is CRJ.
Pat 25, that's the helicopter. CRJ, that's the passenger plane with 64 people on board. What you're hearing there is air traffic control asking the helicopter pilot if they see the plane, because 21 seconds later, we now know they would collide in midair.
American 472, Washington, 1 star, 32017. Tower, did you see that?
And what everybody nearby would have seen was this: 2 lights converging and a fireball, a devastating, deadly impact. What witnesses described as a stream of sparks.
We were just talking. Next thing you know, I heard a loud explosion. I looked to the left, saw just a big ball of fire, and then wreckage just falling down towards the river. And my neighbor hollered out, "Oh my God, that's a plane."
But then silence. From that point on, if you saw a stream of lights, they were probably the flashing lights of first responders, because there was no fiery ground explosion. Both the plane and the helicopter crashed into the Potomac River. We can see that on flight radar trackers like this one from FlightAware. The particular route of this passenger plane happens just about every day, a 2.5-hour flight from Wichita, Kansas to Reagan National in DC. You can see from this flight on January 27th what an approach from the north might look like. This plane entered a holding pattern before touching down. The day before, a relatively smooth approach from the south. But you can see the difference with the flight that just crashed. It swings a little wider, heading for a different runway. But we lose the signal right at the river, well short of the airport itself. The most immediate question for first responders would have been, could anyone possibly have survived?
Very quickly, this call escalated. Responders realized that they had a plane crash and immediately escalated to a response that ultimately included about 300 people.
But there were 2 big problems. It was dark and it was cold. Divers had to contend with chunks of ice among the debris. The fuselage of the plane split into 3 parts. The helicopter reportedly upside down.
The challenges are access. The water that we're operating in is about 8 feet deep. There is wind, there is pieces of ice out there, so it's just dangerous and hard to work in.
And for a passenger suddenly plunged into ice-cold water, physiologically a few things happen. You start to gasp for air, hyperventilate, cold shock affects your thinking, your decision-making. Your heart rate shoots up, and within minutes, you lose muscle control. Then, hypothermia sets in. The night of the crash, this was a search and rescue mission. The following morning, it was a recovery operation.
At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident. And we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter.
According to the Pentagon, there were 3 soldiers in the Black Hawk helicopter. On the plane, according to American Airlines, 64 people. 60 of them passengers, 2 flight attendants, and 2 pilots.
We will continue to work to find all the bodies and collect them and reunite them with their loved ones.
U.S. Figure Skating, that's the American governing body for the sport. They've also confirmed several of their members were on board. Athletes, coaches, returning from a development camp and a national championship in Wichita this week.
Still waiting on a lot of identifications. We do know that a large amount, at least 14 of the 64 people who died on the plane in this crash were from the U.S. figure skating community.
But there's an important question investigators will try to answer over the coming months, maybe even years. How could something like this have happened?
And at this time, we don't know why the military aircraft came into the path of the PSA aircraft.
We can hear from air traffic control recordings. Flight 5342, the passenger plane, was cleared to land, but so too was the helicopter cleared to fly.
The helicopter was in a standard pattern. If you live in the D.C. area, you'll see helicopters up and down the river.
This is true. Reagan National is one of the more complex airports to navigate in the U.S. because of its proximity to military infrastructure, the U.S. Capitol, the White House, a heavy urban center. There are restrictions on where you can fly, what kind of approaches you can make. There are commercial flights, military flights. It's busy.
This is a geographically constrained airport. It's relatively small that moves a lot of airplanes and helicopters through the airspace.
This was not unusual with military aircraft flying the river and aircraft landing at DCA.
But of course, mid-air crashes are exceedingly rare. We can glean from air traffic control transcripts that the Army helicopter pilot both had been warned of the incoming plane and believed it could have been avoided. The pilot said, Pat 25 has aircraft in sight. Request visual separation. Requesting visual separation means the pilot is asking for and taking responsibility for maintaining a safe distance from other aircraft, using their own eyes. That's the visual separation, as opposed to relying on air traffic control instructions or radar. But about 13 seconds later, the crash.
Everything was standard, they say, in the lead up to the crash, but something went wrong. Clearly something went horribly wrong.
So what we don't know, why couldn't the helicopter pilot, who the US Army says was flying a training mission, why couldn't the pilot avoid the crash? Did the pilot have eyes on the right plane? And on the flip side, was the passenger plane pilot even aware the helicopter was on a collision course? Listen to what the U.S. Secretary of Transportation had to say about this.
I don't want to say too much on the communication between the helicopter in the tower and the airline in the tower, but I will say this: there was communication. It was, I would say, standard communication. So there was not a breakdown, if that's your question, in communication between the military helicopter and the American airline flight. There was communication between the aircraft and the tower.
Which sounds like there was no communication issue. But then there is a follow-up from the reporter. Was the plane pilot aware of the helicopter? This was the answer, which avoids the question.
I would say the helicopter was aware that there was a plane in the area.
Now, normally, commercial jets have electronic transponders that alert everybody when different aircraft are getting dangerously close. But it's not clear whether they would have activated at this altitude, and at least one expert told CBC this safeguard may not even have been in place because the military operates on literally a different wavelength.
So the Black Hawk doesn't have it's not going to have a transponder, or if it does, it's usually an internal military transponder that's not picked up commercially.
Either way, the US president began casting blame within about 3 hours of the crash on social media. It is a clear night. The lights on the plane were blazing. Why didn't the helicopter go up or down or turn? Why didn't the control tower tell the helicopter what to do instead of asking if they saw the plane? This is a bad situation that looks like it should have been prevented. Not good. And at a news conference later that same day,
The people in the helicopter should have seen where they were going. You had a confluence of bad decisions that were made.
no investigation has yet come anywhere close to reaching any kind of conclusion. So many questions don't have answers right now. But there is work to do to explain an event that hasn't happened in the US on this scale in well over a decade.
Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Transportation. We also have Cedric Leighton. He's a CNN military analyst, retired Air Force colonel. Thank you both for being here with us on this morning as we cover this unfolding tragedy. And I do just want to reset for everyone who's waking up here on the East Coast. Mary, help us understand what happened here. We know these two planes collided. It's not something, thank the Lord, that we see very often in this country. What happened last night?
What happened last night is American Airlines being flown by PSA Airlines, a Canadair regional jet, 700, holds up to 70 people with 64 on board. It was coming into land, as happens, every few minutes all the time. There were several planes in the air. It was a busy airport. I landed here myself at 7:30. It was very dark, very cold, a little bit bumpy wind, but weather wasn't really a factor in the accident. Also operating in the area was an Army helicopter. It is reported that it was a training mission. There were lots of helicopters in D.C. ferry around VIPs and all sorts of folks. But this was a training mission. The air traffic control tower specifically asked. It's reported, did ask the helicopter if the helicopter had this American Airlines flight in sight. That's very important. That's very telling. It's a key piece of evidence because the aircraft, the commercial passenger service aircraft, are always under full air traffic control and what's called instrument air traffic direction. So that was flying exactly as the tower, or should have been flying exactly as the tower instructed. There's no indication it was not. So the helicopter was doing what's called see and avoid. The tower said, do you have this aircraft? And get in line or fly in behind it. So it was supposed to find this aircraft in the air, see it, and then fall in behind it.
And of course, we can hear the helicopters overhead right now. And just to give everyone a sense of where we're standing, we can also see the lights from the boats that are part of this search and rescue operation. At this hour, officials have not updated. We're still waiting to see at what point this may become a search and recovery operation, because again, we know that no survivors have been pulled from the water. But at Cedric Leighton, this river, it's an incredibly beautiful stretch, right? I mean, behind us also, I doubt the viewers can see it, but we can see the Washington Monument, the United States Capitol. At the other end of the mall is the Lincoln Memorial. This is a beautiful approach. Oftentimes these small planes will take this absolutely beautiful approach down the river, past all of these gorgeous DC landmarks. The other thing we also know, Cedric, if you live here, is that there is constant helicopter traffic over this segment of the river. It's often extraordinarily low. I know when I sometimes have visitors in town, many of them are taken aback by how loud the helicopter noise is, how many there are, how low they fly. Tell us a little bit more about what this specific helicopter does, what the unit that was flying it does, what they may have been training for, and how this could have happened.
Yeah, Casey, this helicopter, the UH-60, which is a Black Hawk helicopter, belongs to the 12th Aviation Battalion, which is located at Fort Belvoir, Davison Army Airfield, to be specific. And what the unit's mission is to fly VIPs and other necessary things around the various posts and bases here in the D.C. area. They fly a lot of people in and out of the Pentagon. They fly a lot of special missions for various entities in and around the National Capital Region. And they also provide a service, a logistical service for the Pentagon and for other military units. So it's a critical unit, and it has had a very good safety record up until this particular incident. They've done a lot of training. There's been a lot of aerial activity in the last week to 10 days out of Davison Army Airfield and several other installations. So there's been a lot of practicing going on for these pilots. We don't know exactly what the nature of this mission was. It almost certainly was some kind of a training mission. We don't know whether the pilots were familiar with this area, if they had just been newly assigned to the unit, or if they were experienced pilots in this particular area. So these are things that are going to have to come out, but it is one of the premier units that ferries VIPs around. Luckily, no VIPs on board the aircraft, the helicopter that crashed, but that is always a big risk. And you mentioned a lot of helicopters around here. Go down any of the interstates in this area, and you will see the helicopters come in and out of some of the locations here. And we get used to it by being here, but there's always a danger in aviation, and that's something that we're seeing right now, unfortunately.
Well, and let's not forget.
Hello, I'm Todd Inman. I'm the board member on scene, and we'll be briefing tonight where we're at in the investigation in regard to the CRJ accident with the Sikorsky helicopter. Let me just start with, as usual, our hearts go out to all the families of the victims. In fact, I just spent the last several hours with them before we came here, and I apologize that we had to move this back. But they are one of our primary concerns, along with making sure we get factual information out. They are having it's a hard time for them, obviously. And we want to do everything we can to make sure they get the most accurate information and factual. And has always been at the core of the NTSB mission, our job is to just come out with the probable cause, but then more importantly, make recommendations so that this type of tragedy never occurs again. So today, I know yesterday you saw the chairman, myself, and all the board members here. I just want to let you know they are still actively involved with this. We're just trying to make sure we're dividing and conquering. The chairman and I have had multiple conversations today. She's helped out a lot in making sure we're getting the investigative needs we have. And she's at the command post right now working with some of our people. I'd like to start by just thanking the first responders. When this first happened, a unified command was set up, and we had a lot of important people that came and worked with us. In Virginia, the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department, Arlington County Fire and Rescue, Arlington County Emergency Management, Arlington Police, Alexandria City Fire, Alexandria Police, Virginia State Police, the NCR Incident Management Team, the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, the Virginia Department of Transportation, the Virginia Senator Warner's office, requirement receiving family assistance. They have been briefed by the medical examiner, the fire chief, NTSB chairman, and myself, along with the family assistant unit from PSA Airlines. In regard to NTSB staff, all staff are now on scene that have been requested. And I want to point out one specific staff member, because we have our own Black Hawk certified pilot in the working group for helicopters. Regarding salvage at this point, the Navy Supervisor of Salvage is conducting salvage operations at the current time. Barges are en route from Virginia Beach, and we anticipate them to be on scene early tomorrow morning. After their arrival, they will be secured and located, and then significant salvage operations will continue. They are ongoing right now, but this will be the main lifting. It's being done in conjunction with the DC Medical Examiner's Office in order to make sure simultaneously that any additional victims are recovered and immediately turned over to them for identification and returned to their families. SupSal, which is the Supervisor of Salvage, is also conducting a debris mapping right now. This will help in our post-accident analysis of how the machine actually reacted to the incident. It'll also help us with understanding some of the airworthiness and crashworthiness and human factors. We have right now two distinct debris fields. One that houses the Sikorsky, which is in comparison to the CRJ, a little bit smaller. The CRJ is in another distinct area, and we consider a little bit larger. The good news is, based upon the initial mapping, while there are some small aspects of that debris field, there are large chunks that will be easily recoverable, and it will aid in the investigation when we bring it into the secured facility that will be located here on MWA. That will help us in the close proximity to be able to review and evaluate. Yesterday, we outlined for you a number of groups that have been stood up. A few of them in particular I want to call out, although every one of them have been working very hard. For your edification, the ATC group, Air Traffic Control, has been conducting interviews today. They're ongoing tonight. They will be ongoing for probably the next few days. We've had full cooperation in getting the witnesses that we need to gain those interviews. We will then take that information and match it with other data that we're receiving, and if necessary, conduct follow-up interviews at a later time. Our operations group now has on site an exemplar airplane similar to the CRJ-700. It's on a hard stand here at MWA. They will use that to evaluate cockpit configuration, seating, things like that. So whenever the salvage comes up, we're able to use an exemplary aircraft to match it against examples such as where maybe switches are, navigational aids, electronics. It is almost the exact same configuration as the incident aircraft. I want to clarify one thing. There's been a lot of questions and discussion regarding manifest. Let me make this very clear. The NTSB will not and has not released a manifest. We have not in our history, not in our past. We will not be in this accident. In fact, there's specific congressional language that whenever it is in our possession, it is not available through the Freedom of Information Act. It will not be included in our report. We will not be putting any names of any of the victims. Any release of that information will come from other individuals or groups. Regarding the recorders, as many of you saw last night, we recovered from the CRJ 2 separate recorders. One was a FDFR, that is a flight data recorder. FD. That was actually in what we consider good condition. As part of that process, it was soaked in alcohol overnight. It was then opened today, and we have a high level of confidence that we will be able to get a full download in the very near future. Now, once we do have that download, we will not be releasing immediately the information regarding it. We will have to go through, correct the data sets, make sure they're synchronized. This has approximately up to possibly 2,000 data points.
Let me tell you a story of how caught in the ensuing crossfire was an American soldier, Jo Ellis. She's a service member who has dedicated her life to defending this country. Spent 15 years in the Virginia Army National Guard, is a chief warrant officer, a combat gunner, a UH-60 Black Hawk pilot. Jo is deployed to Iraq, Guatemala, and Kuwait. She's also a transgender woman who transitioned while in service and coincidentally once worked as the digital media manager for Smerconish.com. Now, go back to Monday. On Monday, President Trump signed an executive order directing newly confirmed Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to implement a policy to come up with the means to preclude transgender personnel from the U.S. military, arguing that being transgender is not consistent with military ideals. When I read that, I invited Jo to be a guest on my SiriusXM radio program. On Tuesday, she wrote a moving piece about her experience. We published it on my website. And then on Wednesday, she joined me for a national radio interview on SiriusXM. It was that night that the tragedy occurred on the Potomac. And by Thursday night and Friday morning, Jo Ellis was falsely accused of piloting the Black Hawk helicopter that collided with the American Airlines jet. And then absolutely horrific headlines like this. Offensive, conspiracy-fueled tweets ensued that went viral. Jo Ellis was the #2 most trending topic in the United States on X late Friday morning with more than 90,000 posts, according to Trends24, a website that tracks trending topics. ISIS fingers on keypads can sully a person's reputation and subject them to online ridicule, scorn, and threats. Joining me now is Jo Ellis. Nice to see you, Jo. How did this all happen from your perspective? Where were you? What were you doing when you found that you were being blamed for the Washington catastrophe?
Thank you for having me, Michael. I want to reiterate that I'm speaking in a personal status, not representing the National Guard, U.S. Army, or Department of Defense. My heart goes out to the families of the victims, and they don't deserve these rumors. I learned of this at 4:30 a.m. Friday morning from a text message of a close friend that a bot account was commenting on his Facebook post asking if he knew Joe Ellis, who killed those people in the DC crash. Then someone sent me a link to a Pakistani newspaper article naming me in the crash.
First tonight, a Black Hawk helicopter was warned of an approaching passenger jet 18 seconds before they collided in the skies above Washington, D.C. Now the heartbreaking job of recovering bodies from the river where both aircraft ended up is underway. Already more than a dozen bodies have been recovered, with family members anxiously waiting for any updates in the terminal.
Let's update you now on the midair tragedy in D.C. Again, a live report and live information now from the NTSB moments ago. We're learning new details about the investigation and also the victims tonight, some of them with local ties. The NTSB, as you just heard perhaps, said that black boxes are in good condition and data will be downloaded and analyzed. Now, this both from the jet and the chopper. Officials said late this afternoon all bodies are expected to be recovered, but the jet fuselage will need to be removed first from the Potomac. 41 sets of remains of the 67 people aboard both the American Airlines plane and the Black Hawk helicopter have been recovered. We learned passenger Melissa Jane Nicondre lived in Brooklyn. Passenger Christine Conrad Lane lived in Cranford, New Jersey at one point. And the captain of the jet was from Brooklyn. News 4's Chris Jose has been covering this. He's at Reagan National Airport with what we just learned. Chris.
And David, part of the investigation is happening here at Reagan National Airport tonight. You can see the air traffic control tower behind me. As you mentioned moments ago, the NTSB revealing the black box from the Black Hawk helicopter that went down has been recovered. Meanwhile, on the Potomac, the search there is ongoing. Salvage crews arriving on scene. Tonight, a crane and a U.S. Coast Guard salvage ship in the Potomac River preparing to lift a downed Black Hawk helicopter. The weather not affecting the operation.
It may slow it down slightly, but all of the units out here, all of the people work year-round in all conditions. We're going to be careful.
Police are guarding temporary morgues set up by the D.C. Medical Examiner. So far, 41 bodies recovered. 28 positively identified. The fuselage expected to turn up additional bodies.
We are going to need to get the fuselage out of the water.
Among the dead, 28-year-old Melissa Nicondre of Brooklyn Heights. Her parents telling us she was on a business trip in Kansas. Members of U.S. figure skating also on the American Airlines flight after training in Wichita. Scott Hamilton on the Today Show.
It's just been devastating, and the loss is just beyond description, and my heart is shattered.
Near Reagan National Airport, 67 crosses going up for 67 victims. Artist Roberto Marquez made the trip from Dallas, Texas.
Small gesture of support. It is something that I do with all my heart. This is not for me. It is for those families.
New video first aired by CNN shows a new angle of the terrifying moments in the sky. An American Airlines regional jet colliding midair with an Army Black Hawk helicopter crashing into the frigid Potomac. NTSB investigators now analyzing the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder from the plane. The NTSB telling NBC News the black boxes are in good condition.
It's a terrible day on the Potomac River. Really sad for all the families.
The Potomac Riverkeeper calling investigators after finding parts of the wreckage. Dean Nahokes showing what appears to be a window and a seat and describing the smell of jet fuel.
Some of this debris blew into this really shallow area where most boats don't go.
Officials say the helicopter was on a routine training flight with 3 experienced crew members, including Crew Chief Ryan O'Hara, a young father. The remains of Chief Warrant Officer Andrew Eves not yet recovered. Among those on the American flight, the plane's captain, identified as 34-year-old Jonathan Campos, who was raised in Brooklyn. His co-pilot, Sam Lilly, 28 years old and engaged to be married.
He was just a very kind soul.
Sources tell NBC News investigators are looking at whether the helicopter was flying above its designated altitude. A preliminary FAA report on the crash found staffing at the air traffic control tower was not normal. In the last 15 minutes, the NTSB revealed 100 family members are now in the area getting briefings. They say barges are en route from Norfolk, Virginia. The NTSB says those barges will be doing the heavy lifting during the recovery mission tomorrow. That's the latest live here at Reagan National Airport. Chris Jose, News 4 New York.
As the entire nation waits for answers surrounding the tragedy on the Potomac River Wednesday night, witnesses who watched as the plane and helicopter collided are sharing what they...
Let's just start with the plane crash because everybody's talking about it. And those latest videos that we will...
As the entire nation waits for answers surrounding the tragedy on...
Welcome back. The Black Hawk helicopter that collided with a passenger jet near Washington, D.C. may have deviated from its approved flight path. The New York Times is reporting its, quote, final location indicated it was not on its approved route and flying higher above the ground as it traversed the busy airspace. The instructor pilot had 1,000 flying hours and was considered, quote, very experienced, while the co-pilot had 500 flying hours, said to be normal. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth weighed in on this yesterday. Watch.
The military does dangerous things. It does routine things on the regular basis. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made. And I think the president is right. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DOD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top-tier aviation assets inside the DOD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable.
Joining me now is the Panero Group CEO and retired two-star Marine Corps General Arnold Panero. General, thanks very much for being here. Give us your reaction.
Well, Maria, I think obviously the first reaction is just the heartbreak and sorrow over the loss of life. You read these stories about the people that were on the plane, about their loved ones. It's just so heartbreaking, and particularly if the tragedy could have been avoided. I think the Secretary of Defense has put steel on target there. He's not waiting around, certainly not for 18 months, for the National Transportation Safety Board to get to the facts and looking into what actually happened. I'd like to make a couple of points, though. You and I have been around a long time, and we know that early reports, including from prestigious print news media, can sometimes not be 100% accurate, so we need to get the facts. Number two, as he indicated, and one thing that nobody's really picked up on, that helicopter was on a continuity of government training flight. This is one of the most sacred and important, highly classified missions of our military to basically keep our government functioning and operating in extremis. And so they weren't just on a joy flight. And maybe we ought to look at in the interim some restrictions on what can be done on a routine basis. But these Army warrant officers are some of the most experienced and highly trained pilots we have in our military. So I think we take a deep breath and not wait for 18 months. And the other thing I would do, particularly if the reports that one of the most busiest and congested airspaces in the country was understaffed, they need to staff up. And one of the things they could do is we have military air traffic controllers all over the country. They could be called in to back up the FAA controllers while they build back up. So there's a lot that can be done right now. But before we start doing any finger pointings, let's wait and get all the facts.
Well, I mean, look, these are good ideas as the officials move forward on changing things. But I guess what I'm really getting at is all of this criticism of the FAA and air traffic control in the first place. I mean, we had Mike Boyd on yesterday, an expert in aviation, and he said that there were nearly 1,000 near misses going into this, even before this accident, that the FAA has, inherent bureaucracy. It prevents critical systems upgrades. So what about that? Are we keeping up in terms of the upgrading that needs to be done in such an important role? And if not, why not?
Maria, it's a fundamental problem right now in these areas that are inherently governmental functions that only government can do. Government is too big, too slow, and too costly, and certainly the FAA is not kept up, and that's a legitimate criticism. and one that needs to be fixed right away. And this is one of the things that's so encouraging as the incoming team comes in. They're disruptors. They're not going to be business as usual. They want to turn things around. They want to make government more efficient and effective. We need to start with these fundamental, inherently governmental functions that protect the safety of all Americans every day. And certainly the FAA is way behind the power curve.
I mean, you know, the FAA apparently has been broken for many years. And Mike Boyd yesterday said that the Biden administration tolerated it and just, you know, didn't do anything about it. But I want to move on to the intelligence part of the news. Trump's director of national intelligence nominee, Tulsi Gabbard, was grilled by Democrats and Republicans yesterday during her Senate confirmation hearing. She was asked her previous remarks on Edward Snowden. Watch this.
You consistently praise the actions of Edward Snowden, some who, I believe, jeopardized the security of our nation, and then, in an effort to flaunt that, fled to Russia. You even called Edward Snowden, and I quote here, a brave whistleblower. Do you still think Edward Snowden is brave?
Edward Snowden broke the law. I do not agree with or support with all of the information and intelligence that he released, nor the way in which he did it.
If confirmed, would you support or recommend a pardon or any kind of clemency for Edward Snowden?
My responsibility would be to ensure the security of our nation's secrets and would not take actions to advocate for any actions related to Snowden.
General, what is your reaction?
Well, Maria, I was at the Pentagon all day yesterday and most of this week, so I didn't see it in person. But based on the reports and based on the concerns I've heard expressed by both Republicans and Democrats on the committee, her answers on Snowden and also on the Pfizer surveillance, which is absolutely essential to protect our citizens, are very troubling. So I'm very concerned, but I'll tell you, I have immense trust in the chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, Tom Cotton.
Last night, shortly after departing from Northeast Philadelphia Airport with 6 people on board. Ring camera footage shows the plane descending before a massive explosion. A large fire burned in the wake of the crash, prompting a significant response from emergency crews. Vehicles in this area could be seen on fire. Police said multiple people on the ground were hurt, and we spoke with witnesses who detailed what exactly they saw in the aftermath.
There was a fireball, there was debris everywhere, there was people running back and forth, there was so much stuff happening at once.
And it was just very graphic.
There is no word at this time on what caused the jet to go down. Right now, we do know that there are multiple investigations underway. The NTSB will have boots on the ground today to determine the exact cause of the crash. And Chopper 6 is live over the scene right now here in Northeast Philadelphia, where crews, they cleared out for the night as those fires were put out. But you can see in this area that there is just debris scattered across the roadway. We do know that officials are expected to hold a news conference this morning to bring us the latest in this investigation. But obviously, this is an investigation that will span blocks here in Northeast Philadelphia and is sure to take a significant amount of time.
And it's starting to appear that we're getting to look at some of the parts and pieces of this medical aircraft right there near the crosswalk near Cottman and the Boulevard. We do have team coverage as we continue to follow this breaking news. Let's begin with Action News reporter Becca Hendrickson, who's live at the scene right at the perimeter at Cottman Avenue. Becca.
Maggie, like you said, I'm at Cottman and the Boulevard, only really a couple feet from where this tragedy happened yesterday. We've seen more police officers come onto the scene as the morning comes on. Investigators, of course, keeping a tight perimeter around the debris field. Investigators, including from the FBI, NTSB, coming out to the scene this morning to really determine exactly what happened here as a plane fell from the sky, causing devastation. We all know how busy the boulevard is, how many businesses are in the area, how many houses are in the area, just how heavily traveled it is and how many people were impacted. And the video, just shocking. Take a look at the neighborhood surveillance video. The moment that plane crashed from this Ring video, the impact, devastation, a massive fireball exploding in the sky. That's happened between 6 and 6:30 last night on the Boulevard near Cottman Avenue. A medical transport transport plane with 6 people on board, a child, a pediatric patient, her mother, and 4 crew members, all of whom were not expected to survive. It was a Learjet 55 that had just left Northeast Airport, according to authorities, on its way to Springfield Branson National Airport in Missouri. And this video from Chopper 6, we see the massive crater in the ground, the pieces of the plane surrounding it, the burn-up cars from the impact of this fire, the devastation that this crash caused in such a busy area. Prompted, of course, the massive response of law enforcement officers, firefighters, state troopers, PennDOT, the DEP, other organizations, NTSB, FBI, so many different authorities on the ground here trying to figure out exactly what happened, creating this safety perimeter. The number of fatalities and injuries still unknown at this point.
Right now, we're just asking for prayers for any and everyone who may have been affected. We do want to note that several dwellings and vehicles were impacted. So what are we asking you to do for us right now, Philadelphia? We're urging you to please stay away from the scene. If you see debris, call 911. Don't touch anything.
That's a really important point from the mayor there. That debris needs to be handled by the authorities coming out here to investigate this scene. They need to be able to get their hands on it to figure out exactly what happened, what caused this tragedy. We are here at Cottman and the Boulevard waiting for more answers, expecting that press briefing around 9 a.m. this morning. For now, live here on the Boulevard, Becca Hendrickson, Channel 6 Action News. Maggie and Caroline.
What a massive and devastating scene there. Thank you, Becca.
Let's go now to Action News reporter Corey Davis. He is also live on the scene now, where the force of the explosion just sent debris flying all over across the area.
A special thank you to our additional partners who we have spoken with, our federal leaders, U.S. Senators Fetterman and McCormick. Thank you so very much. All hands on deck. They wanted to make sure any and everything that we needed from the federal government, those supports and services are available. Congressman Evans, Boyle, and Scanlon, our congressional delegation, a special thank you to each of you for your support. I also need to affirm that locally here, Senator Joe Picozzi, Rep. Solomon, Reps. Nielsen, Doherty, who represents this area, and Bellman, Commissioner Dealey, and Council Member Driscoll was present. If there was ever a time when we needed to affirm what the One Philly philosophy means, the time is now, and I'm very proud about how our federal, state, and all of our local partners are working hard to deal with this tragedy. I now want to turn it over to our governor and to say thank you, Governor, for your support and being here with us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. The mayor preaches about One Philly. She talks about a unified approach to governing every day. What you're seeing here is a unified response to an awful aviation disaster. For as awful as that aviation disaster was, tonight we also saw the best of Philly. We saw neighbor helping neighbor. We saw Pennsylvanians looking out for one another. I want to reaffirm the comments the mayor said about all of the different agencies working together, and I want to especially thank and salute Philly Fire and Philly Police, who did an extraordinary job this evening. We know that there will be loss in this region, and we want to offer our thoughts and our serious prayers for those who are grieving at this moment. The mayor knows, and I want you all to know, that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania stands firmly with our partners in the city. We have, at the request of Commissioner Bethel, 45 state troopers who are on the ground right here in Northeast Philly. We have 25 members of our PennDOT team who are here right now. We have members of the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Authority who are here, including our director, Randy Padfield, who joins me behind here. We also have members of DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, who are here to make sure that any hazardous materials are addressed. And as you heard the mayor reference, we're joined by several state representatives and senators. I want to thank them. They will make sure that whatever is needed for this community gets to this community. I also spoke earlier this evening with the United States Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Duffy, who offered his full support to Northeast Philly. And as the mayor alluded to, he has dispatched 4 members of the FAA to Philly, and there are 4 members of NTSB on their way as well. We have all the resources that we need. And again, as the mayor always says, one Philly, we are unified in our approach to deal with this emergency. And again, I'll just end by sharing my prayers, the prayers of my wife, Lori, our First Lady, and on behalf of 13 million Pennsylvanians, we are all here for Northeast Philly tonight in this very, very difficult moment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you all. When we have additional information to report, we will come back and give another briefing. But now we want to let our federal, state, and local partners do their jobs and go to work. We'll report back to you when we have more information. Thank you all so very much for your patience and understanding.
Disturbing ring camera video shows a medical jet en route to Springfield, Missouri, taking a nosedive shortly after 6 o'clock Friday evening in Philadelphia and exploding into a fireball. You could see a plume of smoke billowing into the sky. Several cars and homes catching fire, and cell phone video showing a massive amount of debris extending across the intersection.
I just see the plane is getting lower and lower and lower. It nipped the house. When it nipped the house, it hit a couple cars. Boom! And to the plaza, and to the Dunkin' Donuts, everywhere. I've never seen nothing like that a day in my life.
Our Philadelphia station reporting the Learjet was a medical plane carrying 6 people, including 2 doctors, a young patient, and the child's mother. Shriners Hospitals for Children confirming the child is a patient of theirs, saying in a statement in part, quote, Shriners Children's is heartbroken. The Mexican Foreign Ministry is saying all 6 passengers on the plane are Mexican. Officials say the plane crashed several minutes after taking off from Northeast Philadelphia Airport. The mayor of Philadelphia warning residents to stay home.
If you see debris, call 911. Don't touch anything. This is still an active scene under investigation. We do want to note that several dwellings and vehicles were impacted. So what are we asking you to do for us right now, Philadelphia? We're urging you to please stay away from the scene.
Now, we also know that several people on the ground were also injured. That's according to local police. And the weather at the time of this plane crash, well, it was overcast skies. Alan, Elaine.
All right, John, thank you. For the very latest on the Philadelphia plane crash, go to CBSNewYork.com or download the CBS News app.
6 people are feared dead after a small plane crashed in a heavily populated area of Philadelphia on Friday. Video shows the Learjet nosediving out of the sky into a neighborhood and burst into flames. The scene on the ground was chaotic as several homes and businesses caught fire. The medical transport plane had just left from an airport in Northeast Philadelphia. It was bound for Missouri with a young patient, her mother, and 4 crew members on board. It crashed 30 seconds after takeoff. Nikki Dementri from our Philadelphia station KYW is at the scene. Nikki, what more can you tell us?
Good morning to you. Well, this section of Philadelphia is one of the busiest areas in the city. That being said, where I'm standing right now, roads behind me, as you can see, remained closed as this investigation continues. About a block from where we are standing, where the crime scene tape is, there is a set of barricades. You see a lot of police officers there and law enforcement right now. That is where the focus of the investigation is. You can also see several cars that are burnt down to the metal. Plane parts are also littered across Cottman Avenue. That is the debris field. I want you to take a look at some home surveillance video that shows the moment the medical jet plunged to the ground. CBS News has learned a girl and her mother here in Philadelphia for treatment at Shriners Children's were on board, heading first to Missouri and then home to Mexico. According to a hospital spokesperson, 2 doctors with Jet Rescue Air Ambulance and 2 crew members were also on that jet. Now, witnesses describe a chaotic scene, seeing the plane, as some shared with us, seemingly fall straight out of the sky. Several we spoke with said they heard a loud boom before seeing a fireball light up the nighttime sky and a mushroom cloud of smoke. People also shared the smell of jet fuel while it took over and lingered for hours.
It just comes down and you just like, all you hear is like, and then it's just like everybody's just panicking, everything is just going on, like, you know, everybody like, oh my god, like, yo, like the plane just hit, this just hit.
Because it came out of the clouds going in a straight nosedive, and the second it came through the clouds, it was probably only another second before it hit the ground.
Now, the NTSB is leading this investigation. We've also seen folks with the FBI here on the ground. That being said, we are waiting to hopefully hear later this morning from Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, as well as the Philadelphia Mayor Sherrell Parker and others. Dana?
All right, Nikki, thank you.
But just within the past few minutes here at Cottman and Bustleton, we've seen some of the FBI and ATF agents arriving here. You see them right there in the black jackets walking up to the scene here. So we're about a block and a half away from where this plane crash happened. And as we zoom in, you can see the debris field. There is a lot of debris out here. Police have the entire area blocked off. In some cases, they even put up barriers to prevent people from